So I don't know if you know this or not. I know you know this part. Long and Foster is part of Warren Buffett's portfolio, right? So Long and Foster, Berkshire Hathaway,
Yes.
along with the 1,000 other businesses that he owns, right? So it's all under the same umbrella. But Long and Foster started a home inspection company.
It's not a conflict.
Well,
all right.
They started up in Northern Virginia, and now they're starting to branch off. There's an office here in Richmond, and I think they've branched south into Hampton Roads, I think. I got a text from an agent because she's in the Long and Foster office, used this for a long time, used them. Now she's coming back to us. But I just find that interesting that back to what you said, agents have and offices have commandeered title companies and lenders and things like that, and we can make the argument that there's conflicts everywhere, but at least with lending and title, like there's enough regulations, right? Especially on the lending side these days compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
There's a lot more strict guidelines, right? I mean, not saying you still can't be that person, but there's just a lot more closed loopholes, right?
Yeah, and disclosures,
I
feel like.
Yeah, so it's a lot harder to do, but that just doesn't exist in home inspections, like at all.
No.
It's the Wild West. Even though we're regulated, even though we're licensed, even though there's laws and stuff like that, but if you actually dive into that, it's really unregulated in that sense. Right?
Well, and I feel like inspectors hold very little liability at the end of the day.
They do. I mean, an inspector will tell you that we carry all the liability, but a lot of them don't understand it, and a lot of them use it as scare tactics to keep other people out of the industry. Like, there's so much liability. There's not, right?
Well, and at the end of the day, aren't you really just liable for the cost of the inspection?
As long as you don't intentionally cover something up.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where you can be found.
Yes.
Right.
Sure.
Because I went to the Virginia Supreme Court back in the day, not for a home inspection company, but another like a plumbing or construction company. They try to enforce their limited liability, but it was proven in court that they intentionally misled the client and covered it up. So the court said that you can only limit your liability if you're acting in good faith, right?
Okay.
So, hey, I didn't know that the sewer line had a leak in it. That's, at that point we don't have to because it's a latent defect. You can't see it, right? But if we do, then we're only liable up to the cost of the inspection, or 1.5 times or 2 times, whatever you put in your contract, right? Whatever you limit that liability to. But with home inspections, like I said, it's a lot different as Courtney's trying to figure out what phone is ringing right now.
Come on.
Good
Tell
content.
Me it's a Monday without telling me it's a Monday.
Yes. So, so I think, when this first happened, I first became aware of it, I was just like, that's interesting. But it's taking on a very interesting dynamic in the fact that we don't even go in those offices anymore because we've been told by the gatekeeper, the person that sits at the front desk, we have our own in-house home inspector. And this isn't bashing on any other company, any other business model. I just think it's just bad business, right? I think there's, and I'm fully aware I say this while sitting in a broker's office that we share, but it's a boutique brokerage.
Right.
And I have a relationship with the broker, and they have zero ownership in my company.
Sure.
Nor are any of the agents required, quote unquote, or highly encouraged to use me or anything else. Sure. They can use you wherever they want. I don't really care, right? It's so understanding that there's going to be an issue at some point. When someone figures it out, like, hey, this is all under one umbrella, why? I just think there's a huge issue with that. I think there's a huge issue with a home inspection company being owned by a real estate office. And I'll go into more of why I think they did it here in a minute, but I want your thoughts on all of this.
So my first question is, when did this go down? Because I have a theory.
I think, I don't know the exact date. You know, I don't know where Courtney
Was it recently?
Within the last few years, I think, I mean, plus or minus 5 years. I mean, for them to get where they are now, I mean, 5 to 7 years, maybe sooner. Because understanding that they have a deeper pocketbook, right, to get things going.
Well, I think what I'm seeing from my side of things is, and the timeline would line up, when I think of the settlement that went through, that's been on my radar for the entirety of my career. So 7-8 years, that we've known that this was, you know, potentially coming, and then we knew it was coming for years. And I think what you're seeing is brokerages trying to find every avenue that they possibly can to collect revenue, understanding that they may lose some with the terms of the settlement, especially those bigger brokerages where they have so many agents.
See, I think it's interesting that you think it's revenue based. I think it's data based.
Okay.
Yeah. I think because if you think about it, right, Long and Foster can only capture Long and Foster leads. Mm-hmm. And we both know that as soon as you apply for a mortgage, the client starts getting all these phone calls, right? Because their data is sold, because whoever owns that mortgage company, you know, is getting all that data for that reason, right? Companies don't own, you know, venture capitalists, you know, all those private equity. They don't own mortgage companies because they care about the mortgages. They care about the data they're getting, you know, so they can get other business through their other businesses, right? And I think Long and Foster realizes, like, hey, you know, we can only get, you know, if we own 5% of the real estate market in Richmond through our offices, that's all we can get. But if we can get other companies, title, lending, home inspections, and we get other agents from other companies to use us, now we're getting that data as well.
You know who's doing this on a massive scale and has been for decades at this point?
Who?
Zillow.
Zillow, 100%.
They're doing this on the most intense scale ever, down to the fact that they have partnered with BarkBox, so that they can figure out who owns pets.
Yes.
Who owns pets, so they have the data, so they know who wants to move or who wants to be pet friendly, and they know how to market towards that.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're
they've
moving.
bought up.
You need an underground fence. You know, I mean,
They have bought up an astronomical amount of any sort of software or affiliate or anything real estate related. They have either bought or partnered with, and they're being super strategic because they're partnering with a lot of companies instead of buying them, because they can't become a monopoly, right? So they have to be really careful with how they do it. And oh my gosh, they're so smart about it. Like they're doing this better than anybody else is doing it.
Yeah, there's been an issue for a couple of years now in the home inspection industry that gets all the inspectors up in arms, and that's these companies buying up our software companies, right?
Yep.
For the data, because again, I got, you know, thousands of client data that I can't do anything with. Right? I don't know what to do with unless I own a construction or a handyman or plumbing or whatever type of company. I can't. It just sits there. So everybody's like, you know, you're selling our data. You know, I need my data safe and secure. Okay. At the end of the day, that's just the way the world's going. Like, you can't stop it.
Yeah.
You know, unless you spend the hours and time and invest the time and money to create your own insulated report writing software, at some point, everybody's software is just going to be a data mine for another company. So I think the focus on what the problem is in our industry has the wrong focus. Like, that's inevitable. That's going to happen. But home inspection companies being owned by real estate companies, I think, is a bigger issue when it comes to the credibility of the inspection company. And even though it's not Long and Foster home inspections, you know, like I said, you're going to find a savvy client at some point who gets, not saying intentionally, right? Because they have some very good home inspectors working for them, but things do happen, right? And they're going, at some point, you're going to be like, well, wait a minute. You know, this is all, our title, our lender, our agent, our inspector is all under one roof. And we got sold a bill of goods. You know, this is not okay. You know, and that's going to be a problem at some point, I think.
Yeah, and I think we see it across our industry in a lot of like, even think about how many mold inspection companies are also remediation companies. Like I tell clients all the time, over my dead body, are we going to hire somebody who can find the problem and also create the solution, right? Because that's just all too convenient. And I think it's kind of the same situation in this instance, is that could get weird very quickly. And I do think when you have, you know, this umbrella covering every single aspect of your transaction, it kind of muddies the waters a bit. And from my standpoint, like I've always said and will continue to say, my job is to protect you. Yeah. That is my job. Yeah. And so I find it interesting, even like lenders who give kickbacks to agents.
Yes.
Or when people are like, oh, well, Sid's like your best friend. And it's like, yes, Sid is my friend, but like there is no collusion here. Like there is no Sid pays me money or I pay Sid money or any of that. Like Sid stays in his lane, Mandy stays in her lane, and my lenders stay in their lane. And like that is how I think it should be. I think it gets really dangerous when does. Everybody is in everybody else's lane.
When you're supposed to be unbiased and objective, and again, not saying that you're not, but perception is reality, right? That's that, and it's hard to shake that once the word gets out. That well, wait a minute, what do you mean you're owned by the same company? Because a lot of people don't understand that agents are independent contractors, right?
That's my favorite thing to point out.
So they
to
think
people.
you work for Long and Foster or Keller Williams or Liz Moore or whatever. So like, well, wait a minute, you all work for the same person, you know, and this is all dependent on you closing the deal.
Well, and that's what's weird.
Because the bigger paycheck isn't the inspection. The bigger paycheck is closing, right?
Right. But to me, like, this is what I tell new agents all the time, and it's what I tell even seasoned agents. The reality is I pay my brokerage to be there. They do not pay me to be there. Right. Like, I bring in the money, and then I pay them. Yeah. And I pay everybody else. And so it's interesting when brokerages or these affiliates take on this idea that, like, I work for them. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. Mandy is the one who pays the people. Like, that's how that works. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think people need to be really careful when they're looking at their brokerage or when brokerages are trying to tell you, like, okay, well, this is who we use. It's like, nope, independent contractor. I'm a 1099.
And that's what I was told is like, this is all based off a text message I got earlier today, right? But, the agents are promised more marketing, more branding if they use
they're incentivized
their in-house home inspector. And again, I mean, we can split the hairs and call it semantics or call it whatever you want, but that's pay to play, like all day long.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is you're paying for that. Yeah. Like, this is where I keep harping on this, because it's like, oh, we're going to give you more marketing. We're going to give you this and this. It's like, I'm paying for that. Yeah, like, yeah. I'm the one who already paid for that. Stop acting like you're giving me stuff. Like, that's how business works. Yes. Like, so that I find really interesting is that they will incentivize you with your own money.
Yes.
Weird how that works. And they'll give you awards with your own money.
Like, well, come on. We could have a whole thing on the
we could have a whole thing on that
thing. And the other interesting aspect of this is every other home inspection company, I think for the most part right now, there might be there's a couple of really big ones in Texas. That's like 100 employee plus, but I still think it's a single person owned, to where this, I'm pretty sure, because it's under the Long and Foster umbrella, is a board, right? Yeah. So versus me, like, bad things happen. Like, this is a me problem. And a board, not saying it's a bad thing, but when you're under that umbrella, I'm just wondering how much concern do they have for running at a profit or running at a loss? Like, do they really care? Depending on what their goal is. I think the goal is data, right? So if their goal is data, then they just turn around to another brand like, hey, we need to open up an office here, but we don't have the money, move money from this company to this company. Can we do that? Because the data is paying off, right? So they're making a profit here, but not here. So I just think it's just all an interesting dynamic. And at the end of the day, like, your client gets mad, right? Because I missed something or whatever. You can call me directly, and yes, all these offices are independently, well, they're not independently owned, but whatever. You can still do that, but you don't really have when you have that structure, like who you calling?
So you think their goal is to get other agents from other brokerages to use their inspection companies as well?
To get the data.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Because at that point, they have all the info on where the house is located, what's wrong with it, who owns it, who is the agent, how much did they pay, all of that.
Yes, I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, or perfectly clear and transparent. Like, I have zero data to support this. Like, there's nothing just other
pulled
than
this out of wherever.
Yeah, this is just seeing what companies are doing, right? Mm-hmm. This is just seeing what the industry is doing and understanding that. So Porch Group is one of them. Porch Group, I don't really know what they do, but I think it's like home goods services kind of thing. But they're one of the ones that's buying up all these other inspection companies. They bought several inspection software companies. They've bought some other niche related companies, but they've been upfront and honest. It's for the data. Mm-hmm. They want the information. So when you talk to other companies, like I've talked to a plumber a few weeks ago, and I've talked to pest control companies, same thing. Private equity is buying up all these local companies, and they don't care if they run at a loss or not. They want the data.
Do you think they want the data so that they can be sold later for the value of the information that they have?
Yeah, like, hey, look at all this information I have. Like, this would be perfect for your whatever business it is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's either because they have, again, additional businesses that they can sell for that. Because, I mean, when you buy a house, especially, when you have access to a home inspection report, what do you have access to?
Everything.
Like, oh, looks like you need plumbers, good thing we have, these companies, an Angie's List or whatever, kind of thing. So you start getting Angie List phone calls and ads and, what can we help you with your maintenance today? Looks like you need fall maintenance because you just bought a house, So I think it's just another revenue stream, a way to generate additional revenue someplace else.
I just feel like from an agent's perspective, like that feels really icky. Like, you've asked me to help you and hold your hand through one of the most, like, probably the largest financial transaction you're ever going to make in your life. And then I'm just turning you into, like, just something to sell off. Yeah. Like, that's, that grosses me out. And, like, I think of my clients, like, I give them a list of, like, I don't know what else to call it, but like Mandy approved contractors, but like those are people that have worked on my house. Like, if you have not worked on my own personal home and done a good job, I will not recommend you. And so I can't imagine just feeding them to the wolves basically and being like, okay, well, I think welcome home. Here's 500 spam calls. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, this isn't an indictment on the inspectors themselves or the people like, that's a good deal. Let me try it. I want to work for this company, or I'll head up this branch in Hampton Roads or DC or Ohio or whatever.
Well, and does it benefit the client? That's my question. So let's say you work for one of these brokerages that has partnered with, an affiliate, or like they own the home inspectors, right?
Yeah.
Does the client get a very steep discount on their home inspection?
I don't think so.
Okay, so why would they want to do that?
It's
if
a
I was the
one-stop
client,
shop.
like
ease and convenience, because that's the type of society we live in, right?
Yeah, but you get that anyway, right? Like, if you come to Mandy, I'm going to give you a list of home inspectors and like tell you to read their reviews and give you recommendations. Like, you're getting that anyway. Yeah. And if you're not getting a discount, then like, why would you use somebody that's in somebody's back pocket? That seems not beneficial to you.
Right. I mean, I agree.
Okay.
I don't have an answer for that, other than you spin it as just a one-stop shop and it's all under one umbrella. It's all in one building, right? Mm-hmm. I say one building. I mean, you can probably have a title branch in every, Keller Williams, Long and Foster.
Well, there's even a title company here that's just owned by agents.
Yes, there is. And there's also a mortgage company owned by agents. Mm-hmm. Home inspectors, not so much, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have a couple different home inspectors, like, hey, you're gonna have an office in this one, and you spread them out. But for the most part, you're not in every office. Sure. You're just still the in-house home inspector because you're owned by Long and Foster at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, this isn't an indictment on Long and Foster in general or the inspectors themselves, because there's some very good inspectors that work there. It's just my overall perception of what I think is not good for the industry, and that's a real estate company owning a home inspection company because the regulations aren't there to separate the church and state, right? Like it is for title and lenders.
Well, my question is, like, all right, Long and Foster, some of these brokerages, they're really big. So the likelihood, I mean, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of agents. So what happens when you have what we call as a designated agency situation, where you have two agents on either side who work for or work under the umbrella of the same brokerage? So not only are both agents, they're with the same brokerage, but then they also have the same inspection company.
Yeah.
So
and that goes to, like, they're not forced to use them. You know, you're still not being forced, because there is still some hard lines.
But you're not allowed in there.
But I'm not allowed in the market. That is correct.
So then, like, I think of how many times, like, you go around to brokerages and, like, give these classes and give education and give value and explain things to agents and whatever, right? Like, that's what you do. And if you're not allowed in there and they don't know what their options are, it would seem that it would be all too easy to just default.
Well, and that is a thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, because you join, this is who we use. Oh, okay. You don't know any better, because you're a new agent and you're just following what the people who's been there tell you to do, right? Versus knowing that there's options, or, you know, you can shop around, or
well, and I think a big thing that agents need to be careful with is, like, we cannot steer our clients in the direction of somebody.
Supposed to.
Right. You're supposed to not do that. And I don't think agents are very clear on that. Like, I tell people all the time, look, like, I use Sid quite a bit in his company, and please read their reviews, but here's some other options. And if you want some more recommendations, that's great. If you have somebody you want to use, like, please talk to me about what you're thinking, but it's your decision. Right. And so, like, you're supposed to have those conversations. And I mean, mortgage lenders, title, inspectors, like, so I just think from an agent's perspective, you better be real careful especially if it's somebody that is owned by the same company that you work for. Yeah. That's sketchy.
Like I said, I mean, it just takes away the whole perception of unbiased objective when it's all under the same roof. And there's a lot of money changing hands, right? Not necessarily with the inspection, but with the deal closing, right? Again, not saying anybody's doing anything shady. It's the perception of it, or it could be the perception of it. And I think that's where the issue lies, right? Like, hey, I don't have a problem if Long and Foster wants to own, or Keller Williams, or Remax, or Century 21, or Zillow. Zillow wants to start Zillow Home Inspection Services, then go for it. I think to me, the problem lies is when you're firmly entrenched in that umbrella and you're the in-house. You know, that's my problem, is being the in-house, right? Because again, now it's just like, I just think it's a bad look, personally.
Well, this is how I feel when I see agents who are also mortgage lenders, which is not illegal in the state of Virginia.
It's not. I know.
So you can be the mortgage lender and the agent on a transaction here. I've
seen agents be the home inspector on the same transaction.
Shut up.
Yep.
Oh, no.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yes. Tell me how that works. You know, that's equally as big of an issue, right? As what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to charge you $300 for this home inspection. I'll give you a discount, right? Because you're my client. Because I know I'm going to get an $8,000 commission check at the end of this transaction.
That's so. I didn't realize that you could hold both license.
You can hold both license. Yes, there's at least two that I know of in this area that are both home inspectors and realtors, and they started off as inspectors and then got their real estate license.
Interesting. I see that too with appraisers and realtors. Yep. That just seems crazy to me.
Yes.
That you could double dip in that way, and like, how is that not a conflict of interest? Or again,
it 100%
how is the like perception not?
But some of this, and I mean, maybe they're not doing that, right? I've had some indications it's just that they are on occasion. But at the end of the day, it's, if you don't have a broker that's overseeing your transactions, that's actually looking at your transactions, like, hey, why does the inspection report and the real estate contract both have your name on it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's not okay, right? So
brokerages allow it here, though.
Yeah.
Even if there is a broker overseeing it. Yeah. I've seen it. I had one transaction where it was both the agent and the lender. And I told my client, hey, look, just so you're aware, I need you to notice the pre-approval and the contract, same person. So I need you to, like, be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, I don't know. I think where the industry, especially for all these other things that are happening, and we've talked about how, like, if you go through the top 10 list of like the most distrusted professions, like realtors are up there.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, if more people knew about home inspectors would probably be up there too.
I think we're getting to that point, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so, like, this isn't just bashing on realtors. This is a problem in the real estate
our entire industry is, it's changing, and I think that it should.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that it's been time for a while, but it is interesting to hear people's perceptions on home inspections and how many people are like, I mean, do I really need a home inspection? And I'm like, yes, you do. What do you mean? Do you need it? Why would you go in blind on a purchase that is hundreds of thousands of dollars? Yeah. Like, do I think you should hire any old inspector? No. But do I think that you should? Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah. It's, I think, and change is almost impossible in these industries when they're governed by boards and legislation, right? But like, just the entry requirements into being a home inspector in Virginia, like, I think it need to be changed.
Yep.
Right? There's way too much stuff you're supposed to know for a 70-hour course. I just think it's crazy, right? The amount of stuff you're supposed to know, and the fact that there's no apprenticeships at all. Like, you just, and I'm a benefactor of that because I got my license. Now, I looked at a couple of different companies to go work for to start off. We won't go into why that was an issue. Before I just said, screw it, I'll start my own. So I started my own. But I felt comfortable doing so. To where there's a lot of people. Same thing for realtors. For every home inspector that starts, they're going to quit in 2 years or less than. Same thing with realtors, right? You get your real estate license, and then in 2 years you're gone.
But literally, almost 90%. The statistic is almost 90% will fail and quit within the first 5 years.
Yeah. So I definitely think that there needs to be, I think it should be minimum 4-week, 5-week course to be a home inspector.
You know what's crazy to me, Sidney? Like, so my background is hair, right? I had to do 2,000 hours in order to take my exams, right? Yeah. I had to do a practical and a written. But the reality is, I could not touch a human head. I couldn't even shampoo somebody's hair until I had 1,000 hours under my belt.
Yeah.
1,000 hours of training before I could wash somebody's hair.
Yeah.
Let alone cut it or any of that. Like, I had to pass practical exams and written exams to be able to touch a human head. Whereas I got my real estate license with 60 credit hours.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's wild.
Nuts.
It's wild. Yeah. Yeah. It's, when you look at what some of these other trades, and the stylist and barber comes up a lot when we're discussing this as far as the requirements go. Like, how many hours you have to do just to be able to touch somebody's head, right? Is insane. But to be a home inspector, 70 hours, and that's a lot of stuff. Lot of stuff.
Well, and the thing that's crazy,
that's every system in the house.
Did you guys just have to do a written too?
Yes.
See, that's what's insane to me. My practical exam was hands-on, and it is hours long.
Yeah.
Hours where you are demonstrating that you know how to do each skill while someone is watching over your shoulder.
Well, and the thing is, so you'll get the association people, right? That are members of the home inspector associations, the different ones, and there's two main ones, and the associations do a lot of good for the industry, but they'll say, hey, I'm this certified through this association because they have high standards. Well, the state standards exceed both the association's standards. But two, they're like, well, they require you to do or do actual inspections. No, they require you. One association requires 200 inspections to be a certified under their association banner, right? They will email them the list of all the inspections you've done. They will pick 5, and you have to send the reports.
Okay.
They're not checking for anything other than did you meet their standards of practice, which is the minimum.
Huh.
It could be the worst inspection anybody has ever done. You could have missed 90% of the things you were looking at, or not even having any idea what you're looking at. But as long as you meet the standards, you're good, right?
Interesting.
And it's the same thing with the other association where they, I think they require like 3 or 4 mock inspections, and it's on their software. It's just checking boxes. Like, you don't even have to leave your couch. So that's the home inspection industry right there. Yeah. Anytime I do a Virginia housing class, they start asking me questions like, man, it's like, you're not going to like these answers.
No.
And they start asking questions about, liability and what if an inspector does this, or what if they miss that, or, and we start going down the rabbit holes of like, yeah, you're not going to like these answers. Because then that always leads to what's the purpose of a home inspection? Like, what's the point? Well, the point is we still find a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the point also is this is why it's important to not haggle or find a home inspector that's $15 cheaper.
Right.
Versus somebody who has, been around or has 3,000 reviews or whatever the case is. Right. So that's the point.
My favorite too is when people are like, when I tell them you need to plan 2 to 3 hours for your home inspection, and they're like 3 hours, and I'm like, yep. And they're like, why do we have to be there so long? I'm like, your house is $400,000.
Yes.
You should spend 3 hours giving it a look-see with someone who's qualified. Like, what do you mean? They're like, that's a long time. I'm like, yep, sure is. It's also a lot of money. Yeah. So what do you mean? It's also
not as long as it should be, but that's, again, a different story.
I've had inspectors where, like, it's my listing, right? So I have to give them an access code. I can see when they get to the property, and I can see when they shut the lockbox and when they're done, right? And they've been there for like 45 minutes to an hour. I'm like, what? Hold on. Huh? How
many? 45 minutes?
Yes. There was...
Those exist. It's nuts.
Wow.
Yeah, there was an inspector who said he did 5 a day. Hour 15 was the average inspection that he did.
I'm like, unless you're like speed racer through this house, there's no way that you're like... There, in my head, I'm like, okay, you have to just be trying to do like what you consider major systems, which is also a terrible idea. But yeah, I've seen it where it's like it's under an hour and a half. Well, because they're looking for quantity, not quality.
Yeah, they're still charging the same price as everybody else. They're just doing 5 inspections a day, or 3 or 4 or whatever.
Well, I mean, with the amount of people that we have calling us about issues that, like,
that's what I'm saying. Imagine.
Oh yeah, that's what infuriates me. Like, I don't understand how, like, because we don't get a ton of phone calls, but we still get them, right? And even the ones we get, 98% of them, you can go in the report and just be like, all right, like, you didn't read your report, like, or your agent said it wasn't a big deal when the report said it was, and now you're mad.
Yep.
But it's like, I know the phone calls we get.
Yep.
And we do a pretty good job.
Yep.
I can't imagine, like, do they just not answer their phones?
I would imagine.
Then how do they get business?
Because I think they're cheaper and they're quicker. They're my clients who are like, why is it 3 hours? And I'm like, shut up, just sit here.
Unfortunately,
well, no, if they're not answering their phones, then how do they get that?
I'm sure they do. They just get the angry voicemails.
They answer their phones for the initial
then they put block.
Yeah, but when the issues start coming in, you don't answer the phone. Because again, it's we go back to limited liability, right? I don't have to pay you anything. You have to prove it. Take me to court, which nobody's going to do. Yeah. I think we talked about before, I don't have to file an E&O claim unless you subpoena me. That's my choice. So you still have to go through the court. And even if I do, my E&O is just going to be like, all right, well, $300.
And this is exactly why I tell people to go read the reviews, and why I tell them, like, listen, you get to choose who you want to choose. But like, I've used 360 inspections for a long time and will continue because of the integrity, because of the, like, listen, they're going to answer when you're ticked off, and they're going to try to come up with a solution. And I've seen Sid bend over backwards still to try to fix problems that were not your fault. Like, it had nothing to do with you. And people are still so fussy, and you guys do everything that you can to try to work with people and keep them happy and maintain those relationships while also not closing your doors. But like, it's the integrity that matters. And that's where I think I do see a lot of concerns with everybody's in each other's lanes. Like that I think once the integrity even looks like it's been compromised, that's a problem.
Yeah, I don't know where all this is going to go. You know, especially with, you know, as we adjust to the settlements and, you know, what's next, right? Like, is there going to be different types of lawsuits? Is there going to be different?
Oh yeah, they've already started.
And what does real estate look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
And the funny thing is,
look like
that's exactly what happened. So that settlement went through, and then the attorney who was the main attorney went and is now a brokerage. And started.
Yeah.
A brokerage.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Like, okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. There's some, like I said, we've talked about a lot about the issues with real estate and realtors, and you know, and then, like we always say, there's always a ton of good agents out there.
There really is.
You know, but we also just need to talk about the problems with my industry, because there's quite a few. You know, from how you become an inspector to, you know, just the different things out there that's affecting our industry. You know, one of the issues that I constantly see is, like we talked about earlier, is those inspectors that do it in an hour and a half, you know, 45 minutes, hour 15, whatever it is. I don't even care about the lowballers, right? Like, I mean, if you want to charge $200 for your time, charge $200 for your time. You know, that just tells me you don't understand business, and you're going to put yourself out of business, you know, or you're going to burn yourself out and you're still going to be out of business because it's not worth that.
No.
Right? When you factor in how much knowledge you're supposed to have, you know, we're still vastly underpriced as an industry for what we're supposed to know, right? And what we do. And then we do it faster because we need reports today, right? All the things that we're supposed to do, and it's like, oh, well, 450 is still too much. Okay, well, we do a lot, right, to get you here. We know a lot. We look at a lot. We do all this work just to get you here. I think we're still vastly underpriced as an industry. But you also look at but my biggest issue is the ones that, like I said, are I don't know what the word is, but reducing the standards.
Yes.
You know, it's the best way to put it. Like,
and I will stand by this till the day that I die. And it's something that I prepare my clients for, and something we go over in the interview process is you get what you pay for. And so when people are like, oh, well, they're willing to do it for this, it's like, okay, well, only they know what they're worth. But like, let me walk you through the hours upon hours every week that I spend just on training, right? Or the years behind me, or who you have access to because of me. But it's like, I always say, money only matters in the absence of value. If you're not getting the value, then you're going to wonder why you're paying that much.
And it's, I mean, like we've said before, like the other big issue is nobody knows what we do, but they also never have anything to compare it to. You know, like we've always, like my biggest comparison is like, you know, when you go to Chick-fil-A, what to expect.
Right.
You go there for a reason. And you know, when you go to a different restaurant that doesn't have that same level of service, you know something's off. Like,
you just gave me a great idea. You know what I want to do, Sidney? I want to make you guys do a pre-listing inspection, and then I want to see the buyer's side inspection report, and I want to black out the information and give a comparison. Because your reports next to somebody else's report, I've seen them.
Yeah.
Those are a disaster. They're so hard to read. There's an unbelievable amount of CYA language that is not useful to the agent or the client. Nothing is, you guys are color coded, for goodness sakes. Like, I've seen
the color coding.
Yes. Like they are the most, this is what I tell people. Like, it's the most user-friendly reports I've ever seen, because clients are going to get overwhelmed. No matter what, even if the house is pretty clean, that report is still probably going to be 30 plus pages every time.
Well, we've talked about So John Craner, he's a home inspector, one of the OG home inspectors around here, and he sits on the board. Super knowledgeable guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the dude's just a wealth of knowledge. He's been doing this for so long. But he said that at one of our trainings, I think last year, because he does a lot of training on, sanctions, how to avoid being sanctioned by DPOR and things like that. Because again, he sits on the board. He sees all these come through, all these complaints, and he knows the process. And he thinks that if we meet the standards of practice or minimum standards that the state requires us to report on, and there's nothing wrong with that house, nothing, and we just meet the minimum standards, the report is still going to be 25 to 30 pages minimum. So if you get an inspector, and I've seen it recently, the entire report was less than 7 pages, not the summary, the entire, because I got a call from the list agent like, hey, take a look at this. And I said, oh, is this just a summary? And she said, no. I said, well, there's 7 violations just on the cover page. I mean, if they go to front of DPOR, they're going to be sanctioned hard. Because again, the minimum standards, nothing wrong with the house, you're at 30 pages. Now you start adding in all the things we do find.
The thing that's funny is I taught a class last week where we were talking about inspections and all of that. And I had an agent in our office come to me afterwards and he was like, okay, I need to show you my pre-listing inspection versus what they're asking for with the buyer's inspection. So I'm looking at, I didn't even tell you this story, but I'm looking at your inspection and I'm looking at this other one, and your cost to cure estimates versus theirs were insanity. Like, for handyman type work, you guys quoted like $300 to $600 for a line item that literally a handyman could come in and do. It would take 20 minutes, right? Okay. But their cost to cure estimate, $6,000 plus.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I was like, that's a handyman's job. Like, where are we getting $6,000 from, right? And like, this is the discrepancy that I want to explain to clients of no matter what, who you hire matters. Yeah. Especially when you're looking at that as a buyer, you're like, oh my gosh, just this one line item is $6,000. And it's like, honey, those are some screws that need to be like adjusted.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
what?
The cost of cure estimate thing just needs to go away in general.
It really will not.
It will not in this area. No, not unless they
change our contract.
Well, well, it still won't go away. Because there's so many agents used to it.
We have to have it. We cannot ask for repairs per our contract without
so
cost to cure
unless
estimates.
they legislate it out of it and make it and ban us from doing it, that's the only way it actually goes away.
Yep.
For them, there's still going to be a couple, but the vast majority of us will like, no, it's against the law now.
Yep.
Because right now the standard state, we are not required to.
You are not required, but we are required. So we have to turn to you and be like, okay, you're the one. And
that's how this all started, because a home inspector somewhere said, oh, I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
Because I think, the contract, I think, states that it's the buyer's responsibility and provide cost secure. And somehow that fell to the home inspector. But they're literally just made up numbers. Everybody, it's just made up numbers. Because I don't keep track of what people charge. We try to ballpark it, but there is also like, there's no between 300 and 6,000. That's a pretty big difference.
Insanity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, I wish, and that goes back to, I think I told you, we may even talked about it on here, like a client or an agent put in a mastermind group saying, hey, local home inspector, and good for them for not doing it. They're not going to be in business very long, but good for them. But he didn't put cost secure, and he wouldn't. And the agent's like, what do I do? Because I got to turn this in. And there was agents saying, well, he has to. It's part of your contract. No.
It's part of your contract,
We're a
baby
contract.
Girl.
We don't work for you. We're not a part of RAR. We're not part of Central Virginia MLS. We're not part of Virginia Association of Realtors. We're not bound by your contract.
Well, and this was the class that we taught last week, was going over what it is that we're required to provide and how we're supposed to do that. Like, in my opinion, people should be preparing their clients that secondary inspections are likely going to be necessary. Yeah. Like, your home inspection should not be the only inspection that you do, in my opinion, unless the house is really clean. Unless I get a report that comes back that is overall a really, really clean report, which, again, this goes back to, you probably want an agent with experience who can look at it and say, this is you're all right.
So that concludes my rant on home inspectors for today.
I love it when you rant.
And I know. And you were wondering that you were worried that it was going to take the whole time. But here we are.
Here we are.
And there's still plenty more I can talk about.
I'm sure there is.
But no, there's still, I mean, there's a lot of great home inspection companies out there. There's a lot of great realtors out there. There's a lot of guys really putting in the work to try to elevate the industry, try to change the image of the industry. Yep. It's just unfortunate that there's, like I said, in my opinion, it's because it's allowed, right? I'm not faulting the people for doing it because it's allowed in the industry to be done certain ways. And that's what needs to change. Right?
Yeah.
And until that happens, we're going to just be on this collision course of chaos.
Yeah. You just got to find the right people and that's it.
Well, maybe next time we'll talk about those pre-listing inspections.
Ooh, let's do it.